الرحمن الرحيم، الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. الإخوة والأخوات الحضور، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطلب لي أن أرحب بكم في غرفة الرياض، وفي هذه المحاضرة التي تنظمها لجنة الاستثمار والاوراق المالية بالتعاون مع جمعية المحاسبين الإداريين بالرياض، والتي تهدف إلى تسليط الضوء على موضوعات علمية هامة ترتبط ارتباطا وثيقا بمفهوم الابداع في الإدارة المالية وحاجة الشركات والمؤسسات له، وما يحقق هذا المفهوم من فوائد تعود بالنفع على هذه المنشآت ومساعدتها في تطوير أدائها المالي. الجمع الكريم، إن هذه المحاضرة تكتسب أهميتها من حيث مواكبتها لرؤية المملكة في الجانب المتعلق بالاعتماد على الكوادر الوطنية لبناء اقتصاد المعرفة، وبالتأكيد أن تحقيق ذلك يستدعي المزيد من الاهتمام والإلمام بالجوانب العلمية الضرورية في مجال الإدارة المالية من أجل الحصول إلى مرحلة الإبداع التي تستند على التخطيط طويل الأمد لضمان استدامة أعمال المنشآت بصورة عامة. ومن هنا كان حرصنا على تنظيم هذه المحاضرة حول الإبداع في الإدارة المالية وكيفية تحقيقه والوسائل اللازمة والضرورية لجعله ممكنا. وفي الختام أكرر ترحيبي بكم جميعا، آملا أن نخرج من هذه المحاضرة بما نصبو إليه من أهداف. سوف يدير اللقاء الأخ سعد الحصوصة، عضو لجنة الاستثمار والاوراق المالية في الرياض، ومعي الزميل حسن بن عبد الرحمن الباحص، رئيس مجلس إدارة جمعية المحاسبين الإداريين في الرياض. وسيلقي المحاضرة الأخ جيفري تومسون، وشكرا لكم على حضوركم. الله يعطيك خير.
طبعا المحاضرة بتكون بالإنجليزي، بخصوص أنه جيف متحدث بالإنجليزي. طبعا الأستاذ حسن حيدير ما بين اللقاءين اللي ما بين جيف ومحاضرته. طبعا فيتفضل أخوي حسن يعطي بريف. شكرا.
Sure. A lot of you know me. My name is Tim Douglas. I'm the founding chairman of IMA Riyadh chapter, which was the first IMA chapter in Saudi Arabia. We went on to form chapters in Eastern Province and also in Jeddah. So now the country's becoming more and more covered by the profession. I'd like to first of all call upon the chapter president, Hassan Al-Bahiz, to welcome you on behalf of the chapter.
Thank you, Tim. السلام عليكم ومساكم الله بالخير جميعا. اعتذر منكم، انا we have في داخل الجلوس في ناس يتكلمون بالانجليزي، ان بالاضافه الى الضيوف اللي موجودين فاسمحوا لي اتكلم باللغه الانجليزيه. بحاول اني اخليها لغه انجليزيه مبسطه للي لغتهم ما هي متمكنه قدر الامكان. ما حاخذ وقت كثير، لكن I will just have to switch to English. Again, my name is Hassan bin Abdul Rahman al-Bahas. I am the president of IMA Riyadh chapter. It's a pleasure to have you all here, and thank you very much for taking the time to make it. It's not the first time that we see the faces that looking for like educational sessions and supporting the education and the learning in our profession. On behalf of you all, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Jeff Thompson, coming all the way from the States. It's been 24 hours visiting 2 different states, 2 different countries so far, and tomorrow flying to Jeddah. So it's like you make it in 24 hours in different countries, and coming from the States, this is the challenge. So welcome back in Riyadh, Jeff. Jeff is just is the president of IMA, so he's as well as the CEO of IMA. When I say IMA, I'll just make it short from my side. I like to just bring the floor to Jeff to have it like a wonderful and great and valuable session for everyone. I'll just have 2 points that I will cover during this short speech, few minutes. The first one, I'm going to bring you about the innovation. Why we're talking about innovation here or creativity. This is the first thing. The second thing, I will be just talking in a high level about the IMA as well as the CMA. And I already have the faces, many of the faces are already CMAs, and inshallah the rest will be CMAs as well. When it comes to innovation, people sometimes when they say innovation and they start thinking about accounting and figures, innovation, how you can link innovation to, welcome Dr. Yusuf, how you can link innovation to figures and numbers. Numbers are dry. People always think of it like this is accounting and this is all the standards we have to go with. It's no more facts. Now, if you don't innovate, if you don't challenge and face the new business trend, you will be much behind. Accounting and finance now is not only accounting, it is a business. Business will not work without accounting and without being innovative and creative. One of the examples I was discussing with Mr. Saad just a while ago before we just come to the stage here, was about the electricity innovation of how to read the meters and how to be more innovative to save a lot, and they were saving like hundreds of millions to their before they become efficient they start saving. And when it comes to the bringing the figures, we accountants bring our management report with some figures thinking that is sufficient. And this is about people making decisions, those figures you bring. If you don't become innovative to bring or open the eyes for the management to see the figures in a way that is representative instead of just throwing the numbers and showing it as is. So for example, if you bring certain analysis, now people are talking about the dashboard, which was not some time ago, like 10 years ago, people were not talking about dashboard. So they become innovative to bring the pain or the importance of some areas of the business. You need to approach the customers in a different way to save money for them in order to continue business with them. So innovation doesn't stop with any kind of business, or even in your own life. So let's think innovative, let's be creative, let's move forward, not just to listen to the story and not to apply it. So this is one thing, this is about the innovation, and I'm just trying to pave the way for you, Jeff, to bring it to this. No, I will stop here. I'll go back to our function, the IMA chapter, and as well as the CMA. IMA is Institute of Public Administration, I'm sorry, IPA, Institute of Management Accountant. This is my ex-job, الادارة 20 plus years. It's not easy to change the word, and I see the good faces that I have known before 20 years. I'm glad to have you all. Coming to IMA, Institute of Management Accountant, it's it's غني عن التعريف. It's almost 90 years old. And talking about 140 countries, talking about 86, is it 86, Jeff, or so, 87 members. So it's well known globally and serving different certifications, including CMA. How many CMAs do we have in the room here? Can you raise your hands? MashaAllah, tabarakallah. So we have like almost a third of the room is CMAs. How about you, sisters? How many CMAs? Oh. Okay, great. So we have a viewer from female. Now, how would you like to differentiate yourself among your colleagues? The train is running, if I call it a train. It will not stop for anybody. So if you don't differentiate yourself and looking for your career in a way or another, you will be just walking like in a routine life. So I would strongly recommend that you really take the time and bring your intention and feeling about it. That shows, alhamdulillah, there's a willing. If there's a will, there's a way. So just think it serious. And before I don't want to go in detail here, otherwise I will take the whole session. Just to close, I would like to just to request you all. I'd like you to go with 2 takeaway, with 1 or 2 items from the session. This is a useful, and we don't see Jeff as much, as well as expert people like Jeff. So we'd like to take the maximum out of the session by having it real, not a dream. So each one is required kindly to take 1 or 2 ideas. And he started right away. when he go back to office. And we'd like to hear from you, either through the portal, which is valuable portal, IMA Riyadh portal, just I write IMA, or in Arabic, معهد الرياض الإداري المحاسبين الإداريين, and then you will find a lot of valuable information, but you give us your feedback, or during one of our sessions, inshallah, in the near future. Thank you again for taking it, and I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce. أشكر من القلب صراحة الغرفة التجارية، وشكر خاص للإخوان أبو نيان والأخ ابن حسوسة as they are supporting from the heart and taking the time. Now, after long hours and traveling from Dammam to the session and other aspects, it's really appreciated. صراحة, very much appreciated. And the same thing, I'm presenting a team who are working. We have 11 board members. Some of them are here, some of them could not make it, but really the work is a teamwork. It's not Hassan sitting in front of you, it's a teamwork. So I wish you all the best, and Jeff, it's your, I'm sorry, Tim, maybe you'd like to phrase something about Jeff, and to introduce Jeff to the team, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, just before I introduce Jeff, I'd like to draw to everybody's attention that we have such a noticeable participation by the ladies tonight. And it's nice to see them in the same room, fully participating in a session like this. I think that this is going to happen more and more. In the rest of the world, over 50% of the financial professionals are women, and I think that's going to also start to happen here more and more. It's if you talk about the accounting profession, it's a natural for them. So I think that welcome, ladies. It's nice to see you here, and fellas, you got competition. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Jeff. Jeff is President and CEO of the Institute of Management Accountants based in Montvale, New Jersey. Since assuming his position in 2008, Jeff led the development of a strategy resulting in IMA becoming one of the fastest growing accounting associations in the world, with nearly 30% growth on an annual basis. We have more than 400 student and professional chapters around the world. Currently, the membership is 85,000 and is represented in 140 countries around the world. So they are one of the few accounting bodies left that really focuses on management accounting and makes a serious commitment to the growth of that particular profession. Under his leadership, IMA global core values were introduced to reinforce the association's reputation as a trustworthy organization dedicated to enhancing careers, organizations, and public interest. These values, which include respect for the individual, passion for serving members, highest standards of integrity and trust, innovation and continuous improvement, and teaming to achieve, apply to IMA staff and volunteer leaders around the world. Prior to joining IMA, Jeff worked at AT&T, which is Atlantic Telephone and Telegraph, I believe, the old term, for more than 2 decades, where he served in various financial, strategic, and operational roles. In his last position at AT&T, he served as the CFO for the business sales group, which is an 18 billion revenue operation. So he has a lot of practical experience as well as organizational experience as well. Under his responsibility at AT&T, he had a number of firsts, implementing activity-based costing, performance dashboards, and a competitive analysis capability. Jeff holds an MS degree in statistics from Montclair State University, received a certificate in finance and accounting from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, and completed the Columbia University Senior Executive Leadership Program. In 2008, he participated in the MIT Sloan School of Management Certificate Program in Innovation. He holds the CMA and Certified Association Executive credentials. Over the last few years, Jeff has been named quite a number of times in the top, by Accounting Today, in the top 100 most influential people list, and has had the same recognition by Trust Across America. The Accountant International Accounting Bulletin recognized Jeff Thompson in its Global Accountancy Power 50 list of leading influencers. So he's done a tremendous amount in the profession and to promote the profession. And it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, Jeff Thompson.
Well, good evening. It's a great pleasure to be here. The introduction was absolutely incredible, almost as long as my talk. But I really do appreciate it. And I want to start off by saying that business is really all about relationships. And I know it sounds very trite to say that business is all about people, but even this talk that I'm going to give you on innovation, it turns out that it's as much about people and culture and tone at the top as it is any technical understanding. So in the spirit of recognizing and embracing relationships, I first want to thank and recognize Ahmed before you leave. Ahmed is our Middle East head of business development, located currently in Dubai and has been here frequently, so he's on staff. And to his side there, Jim Piowski is based in the States and is on IMA staff, so I want to thank them. But I really want to recognize the relationship and the work of the volunteers. The Riyadh chapter is just an incredible group of volunteers who have day jobs, who have lives and pressures and a whole lot of other things, and yet they have time to give on a regular basis to this great association. So I want to be sure to thank Tim, even though he's a Canadian. Well, it won't hold, won't hold that against him. He roots for all the wrong teams, but he's a good guy and is founding president of the chapter in Assam, and all the great work that the entire chapter board, too many folks to specifically recognize, but as a group, and they challenge us. They challenge the global organization to invest more in Saudi and to do more in Saudi to grow the profession, and we intend to. The good news is that I'm here to say we intend to, and we'll be talking more about that later. And then, of course, I want to thank our hosts here at the chamber. Sorry, I'm looking. What a beautiful building, what a beautiful place for learning and growth, and I hope, as we said, I hope you take away just another nugget of learning here. So with that, when I think about innovation governance, so the talk is entitled Innovation Governance and the Role of the CFO. And when I think about where the kingdom is currently in its quest and its Vision 2030, and I think about when I was here last in January of 2016, and I talked quite a bit about this. So, like many change initiatives, as you know better than I, so I'm just sort of repeating what I understand, the kingdom seeks to transform itself from strictly or predominantly an oil-based economy to a knowledge-based economy. So not forgetting about oil, but trying to reduce dependence on economic capability based on price swings of oil. So it's very much a diversification strategy. Of course, there's the planned privatization of Saudi Aramco in 2018. 5% of the shares will be tendered, $100 billion US. All that's going on, as I understand it. Up to 4 industries will be privatized. I know the kingdom has done a great job in cutting its budget deficit by quite a bit since I was here a year ago. And then finally, in addition to the privatization, in addition to the diversification and to a knowledge-based economy, there's also the fact that 55% of your spend from the government is on government employees, and the goal is to get that down to something like 40%. So there's an awful lot going on, but this really does play into 2 areas that IMA cares about deeply. One is the CMA, and it's great that we have so many CMA. So it's about talent. It's about competency. You need competent accounting professionals who can not only account for what's happened, but help to drive the organization and the society toward a better future. So when I think about diversification strategies, when I think about the long-term economic analysis and the sensitivity analysis and the scenario planning, guess what? I've just described the curriculum of the CMA program, right? So this transformation is going to require significant enhanced competency. And CMA is just part of that story. It's not the only story. But then the talk here on innovation, I think you're going to see that respecting and understanding innovation as a body of knowledge that has its best practices, has its lessons learned, has its do's and don'ts, will be an integral part of this long-term diversification strategy, namely Vision 2030. So, the nature of the talk is, I start out by talking is innovation, hype, or hope, and let me kind of tell you what that means. We are going to focus a bit on how to sustain innovation as an ingrained capability in the organization and in the society. We're going to talk about some specifics about innovation. You know, innovation is one of those words that is like a throwaway word. It kind of sounds good. You know, I have a board meeting coming up next month, and I have actually a pretty large board, 52-member board, right? And I could very easily suggest to the board that IMA is innovating, IMA is innovating, IMA is innovating. And the truth is we are, but you know, innovation becomes one of those words like resilience and adaptability and, you know, are you really innovating? Do you have a deep ingrained systemic capability that's embedded in your core values? How are you funding innovation? If part of innovation is experimentation and prototyping, what's your culture around that? Because, you know, every great innovation, every great entrepreneur got to where they were by, guess what? Failing, right? And you know that. Every technology around us today, every individual that you can think of as a great person that you admire as an innovator, an entrepreneurial leader, they failed so many times and got themselves up that you wouldn't believe it. And yet that seems to be counter to a risk-averse culture. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll talk a little bit about innovation at IMA. I could certainly use AT&T as a case study, maybe it's on the good side or the bad side. But I actually thought IMA as a multinational corporation, but a non-for-profit multinational corporation, would do two things. One, it would give you a sense as to the real world of innovation, what's real and what's kind of hype. But also it'll give you, since many of you are IMA members or CMAs or CMA candidates, it kind of gives you a sense for the state of the business. And then open Q&A. I think we have till, what time, 8:30? 8:30? Okay. Okay. So we'll go to about 8:30 or so. Point is that I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. And when you think about your questions, and the last time I was here and the last couple of times, just Tim used the term competitive, I got some really, really good, tough questions from the ladies. So, you know, let's all embrace a culture of challenge here. So your questions could be on any topic you'd like. It could be on this topic at hand, innovation. It could be the state of the profession. It could be IMA, how it's doing. It could be on whatever you'd like. The one set of questions I don't ask, Jim Piowski made the comment that we should preface our remarks by saying we are not the front people for President Trump's visit on Saturday. Our visits are unrelated. President Trump has not consulted me. We don't speak regularly. We do tweet quite a bit at 6 o'clock in the morning, but other than that, there's no relationship between the two visits, in all seriousness. So the first, well, all right, let me kind of throw it out, and when you think about innovation, what is the first word that comes to mind? So this is not an intelligence test, don't be concerned. But what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear the term innovation? Creativity. Money, something new. That's 2 words, but I'll take it. Something new, creative. Money, that's an interesting one. Like, what's the ROI on innovation? Hold that thought, right? That came from somewhere over here. I wasn't looking carefully, but hold the thought on that one. How about 1 or 2 other words when you hear the word innovation? Experiment? Idea, progress. Okay, you passed, which means that I get to continue. So this is what's called a word cloud, right? You've seen a word cloud before, and the size and width of the word there is the key words that come out, but better, idea, change, growth. And my point is that this is an area that could be viewed as kind of soft, meaning if you're telling somebody you're innovating, it's hard to counter them because, like, who isn't trying to do something better or imagining or creating ideas or changing? The real question is, do you have a culture and a governance system that supports and enables innovation? And do you treat innovation seriously as a deep systemic capability? And that's where, when I use the term hype or hope, that's just a little bit of a play on words because, you know, innovation, as I said earlier, is one of those words that really sounds good. You could hype your board. You could hype the market. You know, we're innovating, we're doing this, we're doing that. But here's why innovation is so incredibly important to business and to society. And this could be true of the kingdom. And of course, when I talked about the diversification and the knowledge economy and all the challenges and privatization, I mean, this is at the heart and soul of what is of interest to the chamber, right? And we actually work a lot with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So it's all about better business, smart regulation, letting organizations grow and flourish. So when I think about whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or the Kingdom or AT&T or IMA, I think about innovation in the following way. Business is tough. It is getting, I mean, you know, I was in business for 2.5 decades, and obviously more, you know, IMA counts too, so that adds another decade. And when I think about exponential increases in competition, and you might say, well, okay, Jeff, we understand when you were at AT&T and telecommunications, intense competition and alternatives for consumers. And then you say, well, you know, you're at IMA, you're in a non-for-profit, life is good. No, we face intense competition at IMA. For your time, when you think about education, you have many, many places to go for education. When you think about accounting certifications, there are many accounting certifications, many conferences, and so there is intense competition everywhere. There's consolidation. Organizations are consolidating because there's not enough differentiation. There's complexity in the business environment. There's increased risk. Just think about the cyber attacks and the ransomware and all the stuff that just has hit the global economy in the last 48 hours. Think about consumers becoming smarter with higher degrees of expectations. And the list goes on and on. So businesses and societies need as much of a competitive edge as they can get. And it used to be that having a first mover advantage was a big advantage. But nowadays, first mover advantage, whether it's a new product or service or a new app or whatever it might be, is no longer the advantage that it was because it's very easy to catch up now and replicate with the right technology and the right skills. So innovation and having a mindset of experimentation and creating new revenue streams and new sources of income, which of course is one of the goals of the kingdom, is where innovation plays such a critical role. But it's not just a happenstance thing. It's not just something where we get a few people in the room. There is structure. There are best practices. There are systems. And that's part of what I'm going to share with you today. So innovation does help to get organizations ahead and to create competitive advantage. So a little bit on what innovation is. We think this video will work. It's just a short 1-minute video. So, get out of this. So you saw there innovation, pretty basic stuff. It all starts with an idea, so what's your idea? But my question, and we'll get into this more deeply as we go forward, my question is, does your organization encourage ideas? Does it have a process to source and collect ideas? Does it have a process to prioritize ideas? Does it have a process to fund experiments and prototypes? Does it have a process to measure the return in what, even though it's very much an intangible? Does it have a system that allows you to sustain innovation? And that's the difference between hype and hope, meaning the PR, or the public relations of innovation, sounding good to your boards, sounding good to your stakeholders, sounding good to your consumers or your members, or do you view it as a deep ingrained competitive advantage, as I've said a couple times? So the one thing that I want to introduce next, before we go deeper into what is innovation and how to govern innovation and the role of the CFO, is I want to talk briefly about as a prelude to what I'm going to talk about, I want to talk about accounting in innovation. So just hold that thought, and then switch it around. Innovation in accounting. So accounting in innovation. So what that means is the accounting or CFO team support for innovation. And you might say that, boy, aren't those words contradictory? When we think about CFO and we think about accounting, do we think about innovation and creativity? In fact, maybe in financial accounting we don't want creativity, right? We want to just stick to the facts and nothing but the facts. But here's why accounting, the accounting department or the finance team or the CFO team, is an integral part of enabling innovation. So accounting enabling innovation. And it's really very simple. The CFO team today around the world at different levels of maturity is expected to do more than the financial accounting, the financial stewardship, the closing of the books, the filing of the statutory reports, the audit, the attest, the compliance. That's almost the table stake. That's almost the minimum expectation for today's CFO team in industry. The expectation is they go beyond financial accounting into management accounting, which is, of course, financial planning and analysis, M&A activity, further evolving into strategy, operations, and technology. we have a multinational corporation at IMA. Now we're a non-for-profit. Our chief financial officer is actually responsible for technology, operations, and strategy. So when you think about innovation, you do think about the future of the organization. You do think about the strategic plan and funding new innovations, new prototypes, new products and services. So the point is that the CFO team and the CFO is no longer on the sidelines just providing funding or business case support when they're brought in by the product teams or the R&D team. Increasingly, not fully, but increasingly, the accounting in innovation means that the CFO team is helping to drive innovation across the entire value chain. And we'll give some examples of that as we move forward. So that's accounting in innovation or accounting supporting innovation as a business imperative. Now the other part, innovation in accounting, means that the accounting profession must embrace innovation and technology disruption, or our profession will not be the profession it is today. And by that I mean, so for the next couple moments, innovation in accounting, I'm sort of putting innovation and what I refer to as disruptive technologies in the same sentence. So what do I mean by what I refer to as disruptive technologies? I'm talking about artificial intelligence. I'm talking about robotics. I'm talking about cognitive computing, machine learning, bots. And we are seeing that our supply chain in accounting and auditing is being very much replaced by machines. Not fully. And on one hand, that becomes very scary because there will be loss of jobs and activities, not in the future, but today, in more of the transaction-oriented, routine types of accounting and auditing activities. It's happening as we speak. It's happening in financial trading. It's happening in auditing. It's happening in FP&A. However, the good news is that if you put your forecasting hat on and your futurist hat on, new jobs and better jobs could very well be created. More higher value jobs, jobs that require the management accountant to become more of a data scientist, jobs that require more emphasis on data mining and business intelligence and harnessing the incredible computing power that we have before us, people that are capable of asking the right questions. But that seizing of that opportunity to actually grow our profession and not constrict our profession will only happen if we build the right competencies. For those of you who are IMA members, in the May issue of the magazine, there's an article on how management accountants can embrace data science. And data science, it goes by many names. It's big data, it's asking the right challenging questions to harness the computer power, it's data mining to find undetected patterns, it's advanced prescriptive analytics and futuristic type scenario planning. So the innovation in accounting is not just a nice to have, it's a must if we're going to realize a better, brighter future for our profession of accounting. Because as I said, jobs and activities are being displaced as we speak, but the opportunity to replace them with higher value jobs is very much possible with retraining and refocus and building of new and expanded competencies. So, innovation, so that sounds scary on one hand, but also very, very opportunistic on the other. And you hear terms like data analytics thrown around quite frequently. Well, I think the day has come where management accountants and our profession must embrace data analytics not just as an adjunct nice to have, but a must have, a must have. So, in the little video on innovation, the little simple 1-minute video, innovation, it turns out, could be incremental ideas, distinctive ideas, and breakthrough ideas. all different kinds of ideas. It could be a process improvement in your customer order to cash process, or it could be something as big as a whole new product, a whole new industry that's been created by some of the great players in the technology environment that we could rattle them off as we speak, and new ones that are evolving every day that have significantly automated and made life easier as a consumer, right? And that's the other part of automation, although it's scary because it is replacing jobs in our profession and many, many other professions, it also creates incredible efficiencies. But innovation governance is a lot of what I'm going to talk about for the balance here, is really the discipline, the oversight, the accountability, and the funding to sustain and enable execution of innovation. And we'll talk about that more in the little case that we'll do in a little bit. So in terms of for what it's worth, my two favorite quotes on innovation, and of course there's like hundreds to pick from, but the first one is a little bit longer. Some of you may know the name Gary Hamel, who's a expert and a well-regarded guru in the area of process reengineering. And Gary is quoted as saying, to encourage innovation, to create a real constituency for what could be, companies need to unleash ideas, passion, and commitment across the company. We have to move beyond innovation as a once-in-a-while project to thinking about innovation as a deep capability. And that's my hype or hope theme. You know, innovation as, well, we've got some pressure on our long-term trajectory. Let's get a group together and innovate. Versus a ingrained capability governed by a system. And then the second quote that I use very, very frequently, especially with us accountants and auditors and analytical types, numbers, right? We very much rely on the numbers to guide us, is very, very simple, much more to the point, but don't let what you know limit what you can imagine. So we're all analytical types. We all get in a room where we're going to brainstorm a solution to a problem, or we're going to wipe the slate clean and develop this new FP&A process, or we're going to brainstorm a way to cut our close cycle from 8 business days to 2 business days. Or we're in a strategy session like we are often at IMA, and we're thinking about the consumer, walking in their shoes, and how we can better enable that consumer or member through certification, through networking, through education. Any one of those, because we're so analytical and we're so darn smart, right? How many times have you been in a meeting where somebody generates an idea, not a fact, not a financial standard, GAAP or IFRS, but an idea. And the other person says, it's not going to work. That's not going to work, no ROI, and you move on to the next discussion, right? And I see many of you smiling, shaking. You've been in those meetings, right? And all right, maybe the idea is just flat out a dumb idea, but who's to say? I mean, when you think about the technology in this room and it's being developed as we speak, I mean, driverless cars, driverless plane. I mean, some of these things are scary. People can barely drive and fly planes. Imagine without one, is it going to get better? But when you think about robotics and the fact that, I mean, do you know, for example, when you speak to customer service, you're speaking to a bot. You're not speaking to a live person. At least in the US and in India and elsewhere, increasingly you're speaking to a machine, right? So all of these things that we would have said are impossible or dumb to even think about could change the world. So don't let what you know limit what you can imagine. Take off, what is it, right side of the brain is more artistic and left side is more analytical. Put that left brain aside and let the idea flourish and grow. Again, it could be in your close process, it could be in your journal entry adjustments process, or it could be in a strategy session. If you have some pretty smart people around the room, innovation is really about ideation, right, and encouraging that. And that's hard for analytical, accounting, auditing people to deal with. Okay, so this is the one that the video that I love, but we can't seem to get it to work. But it appears to be working, but it's spinning, it's spinning, it's spinning. So I'll let it spin for a couple minutes. It's probably not, we tried this before, we're not sure why, but this is actually a great video. I think it's another 1-minute video from Oracle, and it's called How to Win the War for Finance Talent. And it talks about many of the things that I alluded to before, that the management accountant and the CFO in industry, the minimum expectation is that they are a value steward, meaning that they help safeguard assets, the traditional and critical fiduciary responsibility, the critical responsibility for one version of the truth in terms of the financial statements, income statement, balance sheet, funds flow. But even when I was a CFO in industry, which is going back 15 years now, that was the minimum expectation, to safeguard assets and to be a value steward. As a CFO in industry, I was also expected to help create value, whether it's the FP&A, the M&A process. And that's where this video, which it's clear is not cooperating. Oh, well, it did that before, but then it just stuck there. But it talks about management accountants being inquisitive, embracing a culture of challenge, evolving to data scientists who understand data lifecycle, who understand data governance, who understand how to query big data sets and ask the right questions in the spirit of being inquisitive and seeking patterns in underlying data that could help with your internal controls, whether it's COSO or your own system of internal controls, or even help to identify sales opportunities through data mining and business intelligence. And this article in Strategic Finance, and if you happen to get the magazine, you should have the magazine, the May issue. It's actually page 70 of the magazine. It talks about the management accountant evolving to an expanded role as data scientist. So we're going to move on. I spoke for about as long as I'm going to speak. Oops, I guess it's controlled over there. Okay. So I've talked a little bit about this. Management accountants as not only the driver, but advisor of business performance, talent, innovation, and there's risk management, internal controls. How many of you are familiar with the COSO internal controls or risk management frameworks? Many of you are. That's a good thing. So COSO has both an internal controls framework, which was last updated in 2013, and the enterprise risk management framework from 2004 is actually being updated in the next month or two. So that certainly could be another big topic for us to talk about. Budgeting and planning, strategic cost management, technology and operational management. So you see there a much broader set of expectations and competencies. So with that expectation to not only count value but help create value, or count the beans and sprout the beans, that challenge doesn't come with, or that expectation doesn't come with challenges to step up to that competency. I also refer to this slide, and I've used this before here in Riyadh and around the world, and this again is the expanded role of the CFO. When I became CFO of the business unit that Tim alluded to in his kind introduction, I was actually referred to as a business partner. And when my new boss said, Jeff, guess what? We've appointed you CFO of this pretty major business unit, I was really excited about that. I knew what CFO meant. And then he said, so you're going to be a business partner to the sales team. And I'm saying to myself, I really don't know what that means, and which one's going to go on my business card. because I want the CFO to go on my business card, because I know I really didn't have, I mean, this is 15, 18 years ago. And of course, the term business partner, trusted business advisor, strategic advisor is much better understood today. But it's very tricky to be a business partner to the rest of the business, to be, to help provide strategic insight, to help provide insight in operations. And it's very, very tricky because first and foremost, we as accountants and as CFOs are responsible for protecting the corporation and the interest of its stakeholders. I mean, the business partnering and being at the strategy table and having deep futuristic conversations with the CEO or the board of directors or consultants is a wonderful, exciting, inspiring thing. But we cannot ever lose sight of our roots. And that is, first and foremost, in my opinion, and believe me, I'm a management accountant and not a financial accountant, but first and foremost, it's protecting the corporation and its stakeholders. Now, everything on top of that is very, very critical, but we can't lose sight of our roots. So I refer to these 4 lines of sight, and the 2 outer lines of sight for today's CFO team are the traditional roles, oversight and hindsight. So oversight, of course, is oversight for spending. CFOs are the bank, right, in many cases, most cases. Oversight for business cases and M&A, capital, CapEx, OpEx, et cetera, oversight. The other extreme, hindsight, the other traditional role of the CFO team is, of course, looking back. And that is real, that's not a negative, that's critically important that we accurately, fairly, and ethically present the financial condition of the corporation, right? Through financial statements, through financial accounting standards in the US GAAP, everywhere else, but the US IFRS 15 or 16, whatever's next. However, it's those 2 inner lines of sight that are, on one hand, an incredible opportunity for accountants and CFO teams in industry, but also an incredible challenge in terms of competency. And those are insight and foresight. Even back 15, 20 years ago when I was a CFO in industry, look, I could hire any accountant, really, to explain to me that here's the actual, here's the budget, here's the variance. I mean, I'll be honest, they're a dime a dozen. But the individual that can say, here's the variance, and by the way, much of this variance is not operational, it's just timing based on accounting adjustments and the timing of recognition of revenue. People that can tell me, boy, inside this variance, here's how much is price variance, here's how much is volume variance. And people that can give the foresight to say, even though our results through April are good, the trajectory is not, and we must make some interventions. It could be a competitive intervention, it could be a new process, it could be repricing our products, it could be bundling our products, and that's what I will pay a premium for. As an individual that has hired dozens, if not hundreds, of accountants and finance team professionals, yes, I value the oversight and the hindsight, but the differentiators on top of that are the insight and the foresight that can help me advise the CEO and the board on the trajectory we should be following based on what we see ahead, our best professional judgment on what we see ahead. So a little bit closer to innovation and innovation governance. It's not a good sign at the beginning of my trip. I'm losing my voice because I have a lot more speaking to do in a couple other countries. So, but here's a kind of a process flow of innovation. Let's see if I can, oops. All right, so apparently that's not the, oh, this might be the pointer. Ah, here we go. Hopefully I don't blind any of my hosts up at the front if I don't point high enough, duck. So as we saw, the innovation process, and again, this could be business innovation in the entire supply chain, or it could be inside the accounting supply chain. It doesn't matter. It could be that incremental idea, a distinctive idea, or a breakthrough idea, as we saw in prior slides, right? So, but it all starts with an idea. And typically what happens is somebody writes up that idea, right? Somebody puts pen to paper and say, look, I envision a new process that could save the company $100 million. It could. I don't know that it will, but it could. Hear me out. Let me develop the idea. Now, this is not a requirement, but this is the funnel of ideas. What we did at IMA, when you see the mini case studies, we developed and formed an innovation council that actually helped to screen ideas. Now, you want to be very careful here. So if you screen too many ideas away, it gets into that don't let what you know limit what you can imagine. So the safest way to screen out ideas that just are not going to cut it, like without making it a lot of ideas and overthinking, is the mission of the organization. So for example, if we did have an idea come in to IMA through like a crowdsourcing process that basically suggested that we get into the consulting business for fee. Now, IMA is a tax-exempt organization. There are certain things we cannot legally do unless we want to pay Uncle Sam back in the States taxes, right? Because we're a non-for-profit organization, an NGO. So that idea, although, you know, there probably are ways around it, is just not an idea ethically or one that comports with our core values in terms of thinking about, all right, that's a great idea. Now, how do we get around the legal requirement that we not consult for profit, right? How do we get around that? So we screen that idea out. But typically there's a prototype, right? You saw that in the video, in the short video. There's experimentation. The point is that there's some testing. A lot of ideas don't get past this stage, but often don't get past the prototype stage. And a rapid prototype is really, this is the kind of thing where you don't study it to death. And what are some ways you can do this? You could do it through focus groups. You can do it through designing a web page and sending it out only to a cohort of your customers or members. There are ways to do rapid prototypes in less than 3 months to get a sense for whether the idea has legs. If it's more of an internal efficiency, well, your focus group can be folks inside the company. If it's a new board of directors report, your focus group could be the board of directors or a subset of the board of directors. And then it goes through a whole process of testing, and ultimately it might become a product, right? Where it actually becomes a product in the market. The role of the CFO and the CFO team had often been like the sports person, the sports soccer player who's on the sidelines, middle of the game, is asked to come in, offer the funding, offer the business case support, and go back on the bench. We'll call you back in, CFO, when we need you. Increasingly, the CFO team, because of their increased role in strategy, operations, technology, is involved at the get-go of the idea generation. Not just in the financial accounting or the funding or the business case, but in the idea generation. That is true at IMA, and it increasingly was true at AT&T because the culture existed to embrace the CFO as a value creator, not just a value steward. And this very much is an evolving role. I can't say that around the world, you know, the accountant isn't still viewed as the accountant that closes the books and doesn't come out until the books are closed, right? And we don't want to invite them to parties, right? Last thing we want to do is invite accountants to parties, right? Because we're really boring people that you don't want to socialize with, right? That's, right, the persona. Not true. We look at Tim. Tim's an accountant. He's just, although he's a Canadian. And roots for the wrong teams. He'll get back at me, by the way, because I had the podium, but he'll find a way to get back at me. So what we did to focus on innovation governance, and there are 3 areas that we focused on in this book. So this is an IMA book. It's available for, I believe, $39 on Amazon. It's actually an IMA book. IMA has now published 5 books. This was our first, and it's called Advancing Innovation, Galvanizing, Enabling, and Measuring for Innovation Value. So it's not yet another book that tells you what innovation is. There are, just Google on innovation, there are hundreds of books, and many, many great books on innovation. Probably the individual that's considered the, if I had to name one person, the guru in innovation, and it's sadly not Jeff Thompson, it would be Clay Christensen from Harvard University. I was almost going to say MIT, but Clay Christensen from MIT is very much viewed as the academic guru of innovation. So this is not another book on that. This is very specific on measuring innovation, governing innovation, and the role of the CFO team. And it's the role of the CFO team at a high level is what I described earlier, that evolving role of being involved in that end-to-end innovation cycle. And the market need is pretty straightforward. We actually conducted some research that showed that organizations know they need to innovate. And why do they know they need to innovate? Because, as I said earlier, transforming a country and a society is tough. Competing in a global business environment for a company is tough. So you need every edge you can get in competency and differentiation and innovation. But they don't know how to sustain innovation. And innovation, you say, well, how do you govern? It seems like governance and innovation are also paradoxical terms, because governance sounds constricting and oversight and micromanaging. That's the application of governance. Governance could enable very, very agile organizations. It's the application of how you choose to govern. That's up to the Chamber of Commerce. That's up to the Riyadh chapter. That's up to the Kingdom. That's up to IMA. That's up to us in terms of how we execute the governance. Are we going to micromanage and inhibit, or are we going to provide strategic oversight that enables agility and ethical behavior, right? So we'll talk about governance in just a moment, but governance, to me, good governance is about sustainability. If you believe that innovation needs to be an ingrained competitive capability inside your society, company, organization, that it needs to have some kind of governance around it to sustain it, so that it's not just a one-hit hype, so that it's something that continues beyond the next crisis. And as I said, the book's available on Amazon for like 39 bucks. So what is innovation governance? And this is, Chinese philosophy, Chinese proverb. It's kind of the two things that appear to be contradictory, as I said earlier, that are actually complementary. And Gary Hamel, the process reengineering guru, said it best by saying, it takes a systematic approach to build a systemic capability, one that sustains itself. Skills, tools, metrics, processes, platforms, incentives, roles, and values all have to come together in one supercharged, all-wheel drive, race-winning innovation machine. And that's an awful lot, and there's a lot of passion behind those words. But when you think about any sustainable business process that you wish to carry on forever, not just a one-time project, there needs to be a culture. I mean, you think about what organization doesn't want to win, right? I hate to, I go to a lot of leadership forums, and even Jack Welch from GE, former revered CEO of GE and winning, and of course we all have a culture of winning. But what did I say earlier? What is the hallmark of any great innovative company and any great innovator? What made them great innovators, entrepreneurs? They failed. They weren't winners for a time. Is that allowed in your culture? Right? And that's a hard question to ask and to answer. And building this into your culture is not an easy thing to do. I've tried it at a few places. It's worked in a few, and it's not worked in a few. And we'll talk about at least one of the places where we think it's working. So innovation governance, even though it seems to be the yin and the yang, contradictory innovation and governance, it's the operating system in which you can drive innovation, right? I mean, there has to be agreement to fund these prototypes. If I believe that there's a great new product and services that can enrich the members of this corporation and the CMAs, and I think it's going to take several $100,000 US incrementally, you know, I've got to have support from the board. Now, it's not going to be a blank check, and it's not going to be the case where I say, well, I had 10 experiments and I failed all 10, but I need to just keep experimenting, right? I'm not going to be your CEO any longer if I fail 10 for 10. So it's that balance, it's that judgment, right? It's that culture of challenge, culture of being inquisitive, culture of being willing to explore ideas, and more. So, considering your organization's environment and culture, when we think about innovation, we think about those three components at the bottom: galvanizing, enabling, and measuring. And the galvanizing we're talking about is, does your boss, does your board, does your CEO, does the leadership team, do they understand what innovation is and support it? Or do they just give it lip service? Right? Term we use in the US, lip service. Sounds good, but nothing comes out. So in terms of galvanizing innovation, we talked earlier about incremental, distinctive, and breakthrough. Innovation can come in all different flavors. It could be an internal process improvement or an external product or service or app or bundle that creates a whole new consumer experience. A whole new consumer experience. And we can think of so many today. Look, when you hear about robotics in the manufacturing facility and driverless cars and automation of the auditing function, it's because somebody is trying to create a better experience, right? That's what it's about, which ultimately should and could lead to higher profits and ROI, intangible as it might be. And we have examples there of incremental, distinctive, you know, gold clubs, and of course in this region, Emirates. I know when I compare Emirates, which I don't fly on as much, to United, which I fly on quite a bit, it's like one gets it and understands the soul of service and innovates, and the other just doesn't seem to get it, right? And does one dumb thing after another. But you know what? I have points, and I'm loyal to a degree. But you know, in terms of distinctive innovation, there's many, many examples you can think of in this region. And then, of course, there's just plain breakthrough, and those don't come along very often, but they come about through a cycle of innovation. They don't just happen because they happen. And in terms of the galvanizing, there are many, many linkages to existing business processes that you all know and love as accountants and financial managers and CFOs and controllers. Capital allocation, budgeting and strategic planning, budgeting, ERM, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't go through all of those, but we make all of these linkages in the book. And then enabling innovation, the second of three components, is different ways to source ideas. And you know, look, having been in business for as long as I've been, you get caught up in the day-to-day, churn out the numbers, churn out the results, the boss wants this, I got a board meeting, and you're like, man, I don't even have time to think. And now we're talking about ideating, but, you know, in a competitive, complex, commoditized business environment, I think it's the kind of thing where you have to find the time. You know, let the lower 10, 20% of activities fall by the wayside, or if you're at a senior enough level, build followership and have somebody else take care of it. We talk about that at IMA. Jim and I talked about that earlier with our own staff, and we're a small staff, of freeing up executives' time to do more business relationship. And how do you free up that time? You empower and enable your successors, right? Because somebody has to be thinking about the future of the organization. And it's not just going to be the CEO or the board of directors. So there's open submission, there's suggestion boxes, the old-fashioned suggestion boxes, there's future sensing groups, there's business challenges. You know, I've given my team many business challenges where I'll say, all right, look, I know the budgeting process, our run rate has been X, we'll budget for X plus 5%. We think it's doable, we think it's the right thing to do, we think it's achievable. And let's say that number, let's say it's people at a conference, let's say that goes from 600 to 700. That's a pretty big increase, that's like 16, 17%. But then the business challenge, and I've done this, would be, what would it take to get to 1,000 attendees? So our current run rate is at 600. We're budgeting for 700. We think that's a 15, 16% increase. Nice increase. We can achieve it. It's doable. We get our incentive bonus. But then wipe the slate clean. What would it take to get to 1,000? And don't let what you know limit what you can imagine. And I'd like to see some ideas. And quite frankly, the people in my team that come up with some really smart ideas, or even come up with ideas that are plausible, are likely to be the same ones that advance in the company, right? I mean, there's cause and effect here. So by issuing a business challenge, or your IMA with the CMA program, and a direct competitor 10 times your size offers a competing credential. True story. The business challenge is, how do we continue to grow and make the CMA the best, most valued accounting credential in the world? And I'd like 3 or 4 tangible ideas that are plausible. So the power of a business challenge is incredible, is absolutely incredible. Crowdsourcing is, you know, I don't know, how many of you are familiar with Enron and the Enron story? Unfortunately, a lot of these frauds are in the US, but so Enron, there's a documentary called The Smartest Guys in the Room, where Enron executives thought they were the smartest guys in the room, right? They thought they had it all figured out. They obviously didn't. They either died or went to jail. And the smartest guys are often not in the room. The smartest guys or gals are your consumers, people that are actually experiencing your product and your service. Now, you might think that you're doing a good job based on net income, based on revenue, based on market share, but you may not be doing the job you should be doing because it's your consumer that is experiencing your product day to day. And so why not ask them for ideas? Now, obviously there's got to be a process to funnel those ideas, to prioritize ideas, to manage those ideas. Why not ask your supplier? You know, people say, well, my supplier is not part of the company. They are. They are. They represent your brand. You cannot be disintermediated from the most important asset you have, which is your customer. And you can't make excuses as a corporation to say, well, you know, that's IMA, but we, you know, it's a review course provider. They're not an approved review course provider. They're not a, that doesn't fly with intelligent consumers. So the enabling part of innovation, and this is a system around innovation. Now you're beginning to say to yourself, wow, you know, the idea part and that little 1-minute video, that sounded pretty good. That I can do. But the rest is tough stuff because it's less technical and more cultural. And then, you know, we talk about orthodoxies versus new perspectives in healthcare, right? Of course, in the old days, and to some extent today, you physically have to travel to a facility and log in and get onboarded and everything else. Today, you have healthcare supplies are being delivered via drones, you have telepresence, you have remote biometric patch monitoring, you have a lot online, right? Of course, there's privacy issues and cyber issues. But this is the new consumer experience, the new expectation that is better for the consumer, more cost efficient for the company, and in theory will free up more higher value added jobs for our profession and others, but only if we're willing to step up with the right competencies such as data science, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the measurement part of innovation that we describe in this book, and there are also articles in strategic finance, right? So you don't have to buy the book. I didn't have time to cover it, but if you just go into strategic finance and search, you can find several articles we've written on measuring innovation. So one of the challenges of innovation is it's like enterprise risk management or internal controls. How do you measure the return? I can measure the expense. I can't measure the return as tangibly as I'd like. So there are many singular measures that are used: Net Promoter Score, customer sat, cycle time, et cetera, et cetera. So how many of you, putting innovation aside for just a moment, are familiar with the Kaplan and Norton Balanced Scorecard? How many of you are familiar with the Kaplan? So many of you are familiar with the Balanced Scorecard developed by Harvard professors Robert Kaplan and David Norton in the early 90s, I believe. AT&T actually was an early adopter of the Balanced Scorecard, and IMA was also an early adopter of the Balanced Scorecard. And the Balanced Scorecard simply says that there are more than short-term financial statements to measure the performance of the corporation now and in the future. It's not just short-term financial results reported quarterly on your statutory reports. It's customer value, it's or member value, it's employee retention, it's innovation, process, it's a whole bunch of tangible and intangible things. That's the Balanced Scorecard. So what we did, that's further described in this book, is we developed an innovation value score that kind of balances the four perspectives of the traditional Balanced Scorecard: knowledge growth, operational excellence, customer, and financial, and actually creates a weighted index. And so this is very, very early on in its development, but the idea was to create comparability. And it's like any other index. You look at how that index is trending over time for your company. So there are ways to measure innovation. And you know, if that index is going up, that's obviously a good thing. The absolute level of the index is less important than the trajectory of the index. So we've done a lot of what we think is groundbreaking work, but like any innovation, it's going to take time to take hold. So I want to end a little bit about IMA. And when I speak to members and candidates and CMAs, this is kind of a mini case study and a mini shareholder report, you know, in terms of how your corporation is doing. You know, we call you members and not customers and not shareholders, but if you're a member, you're investing in IMA through dues and fees and certification. So to me, it's not a whole lot different. So we'll wrap up in about less than 15 minutes and then open it up for questions on anything you'd like. You know, how to make innovation real, what's your worst experience with innovation, what's your best experience with innovation, how's the CMA program, whatever you'd like to ask. So the innovation journey for IMA, and when I say innovation, I'm talking not about the hype and the public relations part of innovation. I'm talking about the systemic capability with a system around it, right? I'm talking about real innovation. So a few years ago, Tim, in his, again, very, very kind introduction, talked about our core values. And core values, to me, are integral to IMA's success now and in the future. And we have these 5 core values. When I was asked to become CEO of this organization 9 years ago, almost 9 years ago, and we were in a turnaround situation, whenever you're in a turnaround situation, you focus on maybe 2 or 3 things you can do, because you can't focus on too much, because you got to turn the place around with the help of incredible volunteers and incredible board. And we decided to focus 9 years ago, because IMA was not in the growth path it is today. We were on a downward spiral in many, many ways. And so we decided to focus on 2 things, cash and culture. We had to fix our financial discipline and our financial trajectory. And then simultaneously, we had to fix our culture. So we developed our first ever core values, and you see the 5 there. There's nothing particularly unique about them. What is unique about IMA's core values are that when I get my performance review in a couple months, I will be talking to the chairman of the board. He'll be talking to me not only about what I produced in terms of CMAs and CMA candidates, but he'll be talking to me about each one of those 5 core values. And we actually have a rubric, a 1 to 5 rubric. I mean, think about it. 1 is unacceptable, 5 is role model. And it's a weighting process, so it's not only the what I produce, but how I produce it, and that applies to every one of our global staff. And you might say, well, boy, how do you do that? It's not like you predicted 20,000 CMA candidates and you got 18,000 or 22. This is human behavior. And my point is, it's not as much about the rating as it is the conversation. And people know that. People at IMA and in places with a good, strong culture know what good behavior is and know that that will result in promotions and higher pay and more responsibility. And people that don't sign up in a genuine way for the core values, the how, not just the what, won't be in the company. I mean, it's as simple as that. Now, it's harder to adjudicate behavior than it is IFRS financial performance, or, I'm sorry, financial performance, but it's about the conversation. So specific to innovation, when we read the 5th core value, we believe innovation, spirit of continuous improvement, our engines keep us relevant, vital growing, our culture, it read well, but we stepped back only about 5 years ago and we said, you know what? We're not truly living up to this core value. We have no systemic capability, no incentives, no real understanding of what innovation is or isn't. So we did something about it. Now, a lot of us have been involved in innovation and could probably self-facilitate our innovation journey, but we wound up hiring an outside expert to make it real, and he helped guide us on our innovation journey. We created 3 value pillars. So every employee at IMA, of which there's about 130 around the world, so we're not a big, big enterprise, even though we're in over 100 countries and 400 chapters and councils, but we felt the word value. When you think about how you name departments, they're very inward sounding and very functional. So we wanted to make sure that every activity related to, in one way or another, generating value. So there are those that work on content versus delivery versus input, but they're all about value. And then we formed an innovation council. Remember the innovation council in that graphic that I showed you on the innovation process? That helped to screen ideas and created an idea submission process, an evaluation, and a marketing communication plan, right? So we made it real in the governance sense. We created, in Montvale, New Jersey, and if any of you are in the area, which would be New York City, please visit headquarters. we developed what's called an Inspired Technology Lab. And what you see there is our Inspired Technology Lab that people from multiple siloed departments come in to work together. Now, they don't work on ad hoc projects. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they work on projects that involve multiple departments. And instead of schedule, so you got to have the brand team and the marketing team and the IT and the product. You know what? Sometimes it takes 2 weeks to arrange the meeting. That's ridiculous. That's not agile. That's not consumer friendly. That's not putting the user and the consumer first. So out of our innovation journey came this Inspired Technology Lab that is agnostic to department. People in that room at any point in time could be from marketing, they could be from the product group, they could be from IT, or maybe all of the above. And that helped us to create what we've heard from you, a user experience on our website that is more logical, more personalized, and more consumer friendly. Because oftentimes you build a website and it's all about product groups competing for real estate space, which is so inward and insular versus the consumer experience. And have we solved everything and figured out? No, of course we haven't. But I will tell you that this Inspired Technology Lab came as a result of us saying to self, don't let what you know limit what you can imagine, and building a systemic capability around innovation. We also, as we move into 2017, from left to right.
Jeff, can I
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me, guys? Or, yeah, I just like to challenge the idea of like this room, people like sitting together to discuss and brainstorm big ideas. Some cultures, I think the challenge people start bringing the ideas to like discussions. If I like just to, if one or two can share experience, the challenges of the culture. Any comments or?
Yeah, so the question, does the culture of the society encourage idea generation, and at what level? Now, even in the U.S., and as you're thinking about an answer to that great question, even in the U.S., it's often thought, not always, but often thought that the only ones that could generate the ideas are the ones at the top of the organization, because they're the smart people, right? They're the smart people who may have lost their way in terms of the actual work and workflow, and maybe even the market. But yeah, I mean, that's a good question. If the culture of the society doesn't encourage a culture of challenge, a culture of experimentation and prototyping, of being inquisitive, as opposed to just do your job and do it well, and that's how you'll be successful. That's a great question.
I may add something, Jeff. I may ask our audience if they have faced some or come up with an idea or an innovative idea within their organization, and they can challenge it with us, or they explore it to us. I mean, we wish this presentation could be two-way communication. It's not the only Jeff that will give you. If you have some idea or thoughts, it will be good to share it with us.
Yep. Yeah, actually, why don't we open it up now? I mean, what I was going to talk about is 4 innovations that we've developed. The last one, actually, CSCA, is, we just announced it a couple weeks ago. It's a new specialty credential. If you have a CMA, you're eligible to get a new credential that sits on top of the CMA called Certified in Strategy and Competitive Analysis. So we're very, very excited, and that came about a few people sitting in a room saying, how can we enhance the value of the CMA Obviously, one way is to make the CMA program, you know, itself better. But this idea actually came out of, you know, one of our staff people that said, you know what? Maybe we keep the core content as it is, but we build specialties like strategy and competitive analysis, like data analytics, which I think would be the next one. So why don't we open it up now? I think I've gone on for probably 90 minutes. And absolutely, we have, I think, plenty of time for your thoughts, how, you know, no matter how many times I speak about innovation, and I have to admit, I'm probably a little more comfortable talking about activity-based costing or balanced scorecards or COSO risk management internal controls, because it's real, it's tangible, it's not as human-driven and soft in terms of its fuzziness and culture orientation. But you could probably tell I feel just as passionate about innovation as helping to sustain growth in a competitive, consolidating, commoditized environment as I do activity-based costing, balanced scorecard, et cetera, put together. So that could be a fair question. You know, tell us more. How do you make it real? Right? But, so it's your turn? Yes.
I will
Ahmed
ask you, if you don't mind, Ahmed, someone can help you instead of you. I mean, you have so people to help. But before we start taking the questions, I thank you very much, Jeff, for the, I would call it excellent presentation. I learned a lot from this. I was curious about the subject for the last few days. I was like using YouTube and, you know, some articles and read about it to prepare, to learn and to now bring it more efficient. I asked at the beginning everyone to take a couple of things to see how practical in his own. So don't forget to take like a couple of things to take away. We wanted to go with just the ideas are always great, but the challenge, how to apply those ideas, and they do have to succeed as mentioned. You need just to bring them, test them, and sometimes and validate them. Maybe they will work, and you do some prototype for some business, and it will work. Now we'd like to just open for the floor for everyone. If you like to best utilize the time, I'd like to ask everyone who would like to participate just to directly take us to the question right away after introducing himself, and better to present you where you work, just quickly. So I'll start from who is ready, ladies and gentlemen as well. So please, take the mic, please.
No.
So my name is Al Hassan from LSC Logistics, Warehousing and Logistics Company. And I think part of the, as a reflection on your statement, people here are not liberal enough to take up or take on new ideas. So this is the fear of failure, or they couldn't handle it if it work out. So, but unfortunately enough, some countries right now, even global leaders like US, are taking the same culture. I've read recently Harvard Business Review about the innovation, and one of the major drivers for innovation is the diversity. But unfortunately, the United States now is the Trump administration, and this is not a Trump-related question, calls for banning certain people from coming to the United States and building walls and deporting people because how they look like or how they pray. So how would you see innovation challenged by all of these reasons? And this is the first question. The second is CMA. You said CMA, you want to make it like one of the best credentials for in accounting. Do you think it's fair enough for the MCQs to be just answered in like 1.5 minute, especially the involved and the numericals question? Do you think it's fair enough to give only 1.5 minutes for one question?
Oh, I got you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So, so the first question's a lot harder than the second.
I know this.
You know, I would argue that, like when I think about the kingdom itself, and I think I've, you know, from what I've read about Vision 2030, I can't imagine, and this might be my naivete as a dumb American. Some Americans are actually pretty dumb, and I'm not necessarily talking about people following me here to the kingdom, but whatever you call it, innovation, process improvement, if you're going to transform this economy to reduce reliance on oil and to diversify and privatize and to, you know, head toward a decade plus in 2030 with a closed budget deficit and new sources of growth, I can't imagine how it's going to happen without some level of new idea generation. Now, it could be in a much more controlled way. You know, it might be in a way that says, maybe there are a few people that will say, hey, you know what, great idea, but it's not going to fly. So, and I even think about China, and you think 5 years ago, innovation wasn't even a discussion for China, because you know what? When you're growing your GDP at 14%, you ride that wave as long as you can. What do I need innovation for? I'll just copy from, I'll just import talent. I wouldn't say copying, but copying, right? Or reusing. Well, guess what? We've actually done more innovation lectures and training in China in the last 24 months than we have in the US. Because guess what? What's China's GDP growth today? 6-7%, right? And they're a little bit nervous about it going even lower, and trade deficits and new administration. So China is really talking up innovation. But it's like anything else. It's, do you believe in innovation? Is that a yes, no? And then it's, how do you execute innovation in a way that works for the culture and the society and the company, right? And that's going to vary. But if the first screen is, do you believe in innovation as a systemic capability to create differentiation in the face of all the challenges that societies and companies, organizations face? I think that's increasingly the easier question to answer to the affirmative. Now, on the second question, the minute per multiple choice. So, I became a CMA in 2010. And, these tests, and I'm totally independent of ICMA, meaning it falls under my purview, but the exam itself is independent, right? Because we want to maintain the integrity of the exam so it's not subject to growth objectives. And, the exam is, it's meant to be a rigorous exam, right? And so, yeah, I mean, a minute, it depends upon whether it's an A-type question or a B or a C. A is basic learning and C is synthesis. But the experts will say that, yeah, it is, for a learned candidate, it is the right amount of time. So thank you for that question. I did the best I could with that first part. That was a toughie.
Any question from the lady side? Anyone ready for the question? Yes, can you bring the mic to the left, if you don't mind? Raise your hand, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Your name, please, first.
This is Abir. I want to ask you about vanishing jobs, as you mentioned. Where do you see business appraisers in the innovation trend? Are they catching up, or it's a late catch up for them?
So it depends upon, so in other words, will the new growth jobs compensate for the lost jobs, right? And you know what? the beauty about being a futurist is you can never be wrong, because by the time the future comes, you've moved on, or you're not. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious. So when you look at the experts who, there's actually a whole profession being referred to as, futurists, right? IMA actually hired a futurist for the first time, an outside expert, and this futurist, so we all do environmental scans as part of our strategic plan. We look at the environment, we look at socioeconomic trends and global macroeconomic trends, but a futurist will take that environmental scan and they'll go deeper, wider, and longer. If your strategic plan is like 4 or 5 years, the futurist will say, no, you got to think out scenarios 10, 15 years. And, longer, wider, deeper. So it really does depend, quite honestly, on, because this is all gaming theory. This is all talking about possibilities. Now, I'll actually see if I can find it while we're taking the next question, but there's actually a great book that I read by 3 executives at Cognizant, which is the big global IT company. And they do some scenarios that seemed pretty plausible. So as a management accountant, as a CMA, I don't look at the bottom line numbers. I look at the assumptions and the thought process that goes behind the assumptions that result in an outcome. And this particular book says that in our profession, the jobs displaced will be more than offset by the new jobs created. I've seen statistics that say for grade school children in the U.S., I think it only applies to the U.S., but it could be global. But for grade school, like, say 1st grade through 7th grade, that something close to 50% of the jobs that they'll have when they become job ready will be brand new jobs. Of course, many will be in the technology, data science area. So this particular book that, as we're transitioning to the next question, I'll see if I could pull up, by these 3 does a lot of gaming. They go profession by profession, task by task. They put probabilities of displaced jobs. They then add in the new types of jobs that will be created, higher order, more advanced, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It depends who you talk to. The only thing you can do in an environment of uncertainty, the only thing we know for certain is that jobs are going away. That's not a future. That's happening as we speak. But it's our opportunity as a profession, and IMA has an absolute obligation to help create this future. What will these new jobs look like? What are the competencies that you're going to need? What does it mean when Jeff Thompson talks about data science and refers to page 70 of this month's strategic finance? What the heck is data science? Do we need to become PhD statisticians or econometricians all of a sudden? No. But do we need a whole lot more than we have today in terms of our analytical toolkit? Yes. So the answer is it's almost like ours to develop as a profession. Because if we don't create the new jobs that are more analytical, more foresight, more insight, then yeah, there's going to be job attrition and job loss. So as we go to the next question.
Yeah, but I would like to, just to make it, raise your hand first if you like to speak, and we have 2 questions from the men's side and 1 more from the ladies, and we end up with that, because approaching like the closing time.
Yep.
So from this side, who would like to share? In the middle here, in the middle, in the back.
I already have the mic, sir.
I don't know, I don't want to be like Faiz, but where's the mic?
I have a question ready.
Where's the mic? You have the mic already? Where are you? Raise your hand. I cannot see anybody here. Who has the mic?
I got the mic.
Yeah, please go ahead. Speak.
My name is Amir Al-Omari, and I'm a senior manager in a Big Four. My question is, how would you find the balance between the adopting innovation and the cost of change management, given the fact that CFOs, the CFO role now is merging and shifting from just being a debit credit guy type of accountant into more focused on strategic kind of strategic approach to kind of serve the organization as either a catalyst or a custodian of assets or whatever the case is. So how would you find that balance?
Well, the best way to find the balance, and believe me, you live through this real time, because the question is, your question basically is, it's an incredibly fast-paced business environment. I mean, CFO teams, Big Four, we're all being asked to do more with less. And now you're kind of creating this sort of separate add-on, right, called innovation. And how do I balance that with risk management? How do I balance that with the day-to-day pressures of growing and keeping up, right, with disruptive? Is that basically the question? So the best way to do it is to, and this is easier said than done, is to not, as Gary Hamel said, treat it as a once-in-a-while project. And it's hard because innovation kind of sounds very soft and squishy, and why do I need to have innovation governance? Why do I need to measure innovation? Why do I need to incentivize? Why do I need to balance it against risk? Well, you either believe in it or you don't. And so the easiest way to achieve balance is to make it a business, like a recognized business process. We just came from the Dubai Airport Free Zone, and the gentleman sitting next to me, his title was the Chief Innovation Officer. Not every organization has to have a Chief Innovation Officer, but that kind of tells you that they take innovation seriously as a systemic capability. And yeah, there's going to have to be balance between how much that innovation officer gets as prototyping versus how much we get to deal with the fact that prices dropped in our industry and we have revenue repression. But at least it's in the, it's almost like it's in the game. It's in the game for discussion versus, oh, we don't have time. It's like training. I mean, at AT&T, as an employee, the number of times that we did dumb, stupid things like cutting the training budget, and I'm referring to AT&T and my bosses then, not anyone else, but I'm like, man, you're cutting training? All right, maybe to some degree, but like totally? Really? Like, we talk about employees as our competitive asset, and we're going to cut training? So, but at least it has to be in the conversation as opposed to, you know what, we had that experiment with innovation, we generated a few ideas. Nah, no way. So, but on the other hand, business is business. People often ask, well, how does innovation sync with risk management? Well, my answer there is that if you listen to COSO, every organization should have a written or an unwritten risk appetite statement. What is their philosophy around risk and how much risk they're willing to take on? And what is that risk velocity, like short-term, long-term? And that maybe should be a screen on your innovation, right? I mean, if you aspire to be the #1 market share leader by 2020, you're going to have to take risks, and you're going to have to innovate, and you're going to have to balance the two. And that's the beauty of business, right? It's smart people will figure it out. But it has to be in the equation, it has to be in the game. So great question.
Thank you, Jeff. I think some good topics that bring it to your heart, so you become like too passionate to bring it to the level of knowledge as well. Thank you for taking enough time for I like the change manager topic, and it's those kind of new topics that people taking it serious, and without changing the mindset of people, we will never go nowhere. And especially we're talking about innovation. Who is ready from the lady side, if you like, or we take it from men's side? So who's ready? You have the mic. Can you give it to Masoud, to the mic in the middle, please? And just mention your name and just ask the question right away, please.
Muhammad Amr, Riyadh Bank. Okay, now we are moving into a digital era of business, of doing business. Okay, will the this digitization of all the business processes and the customer experience, will it change the way we are doing business? And how can we change the way we are doing business? Okay, and let me say how this will affect the business strategy overall for all organizations.
Yeah, so that's it's not appearing that I'm going to be able to find that book, but we'll get the book to the chapter, the one I was referring to before. The question was around digitization, right? And you know, I would argue that digitization of the supply chain, you know, it's also referred to as the Internet of Things. For those of you that are heavy into technology, the Internet of Things, and you know, everything becoming wired and capable of, you know, I mean, you think about devices in our home and, you know, Alexa and all kinds of things where you talk to it and it does everything you need. So the question is not if, but, or when, it's that it's happening now. And obviously the Oracles and the IBMs talk about it. So the real question, I think, is the role of the accountant and the finance manager in an environment where digitization is not only going to occur, it's occurring now. And with the thought of the Internet of Things, where more and more is being wired and connected and digitized, it's only going to be more and not less. And so the real opportunity for management accountants is how to harness that capability, how to harness that digitization. Meaning, in theory, if you're an analyst, you're, you know, the old number crunching that we used to do and probably still do to some extent in Excel and things like that. I mean, if you could reduce that to a nanosecond, you know, what used to take a lot of computing time away from your analyst time. So the mindset should be one to embrace it, but to build and retool your own skill set. And I encourage you to just Google on data science and take a look at this very short article in this month's Strategic Finance. And I'll get a hold of that book. I'm kind of annoyed I can't find it here. By the, you know, kind of how to cope in a digital age, right? Because it's happening and it's going to happen more. You know, how many of you have heard of blockchain, right? A few of you have heard of blockchain. How many of you know what blockchain really means? And yet it's like the latest technology, right, that you'll probably be hearing a lot more about in the next 12 months in terms of its ability to create a distributed ledger and to cut out all the intermediaries that are involved in contracts and distributed ledgers. So you're looking at me now like, what is this guy talking about? A year from now, you'll know as much as I do about it because it's my job to keep ahead of it. So, you know, I don't even like the term disruptive technology because it sounds very negative and pessimistic. It absolutely has the opportunity to constrict and contract our profession, but that's up to us. It also has the opportunity to create more value-added, more reputation and stature for the accounting profession.
Okay, Jeff. Last question for this gathering, but the questions are open. We have at our portal, IMA Riyadh chapter, we have info@ima.com. Please visit the portal and you have contact us, ask any question, and we'll get the answer for you. We'll forward it to Jeff. We'll get the answer if you have it within our team or the professionals. Last question, if you like to, who have the question? From you ladies side, you have a question? Go ahead, please. You have the mic for her, please. And just ask the question right away start with your name, please.
Hello, my name is Heba. Do you think the innovation in Islamic finance could help the change regarding to the vision to 2030? So
Islamic finance is actually a topic that I don't know a whole lot about. I mean, I certainly understand what it is. And, you know, when I think about accounting standards, so I mean, my general statement would be, when you think about accounting standards and IFRS, and people say, well, IFRS does allow for a consistent language across the world, except for the US. Although we do have agreements on revenue recognition and leasing, the new leasing standard. But what I say to them is I say, I mean, that's a noble cause and a noble outcome to aspire to. But many, many countries, including China, they actually nationalize IFRS. In other words, IFRS in China is not necessarily IFRS in Saudi, because they have chosen, rightfully so, whether it's fair value or banking, they've chosen to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to basically buy into the IFRS framework for the most part, but we reserve the right as a society to nationalize certain standards. Now, what we're saying is the opportunity to create a unique perspective that's important for our society outweighs the risk of less comparability. And, you know, I think that's up to each regulatory jurisdiction to say, like I said, the opportunity from nationalizing certain standards and rules exceeds the risk of less comparability across a line item. I think that's very much in the purview and the right of the national regulatory body.
With that, I will hand it. Thank you very much again, Jeff. And if you don't mind, before we could do the closing with Mr. Saad al-Hassosa, I would like to thank, on behalf of you, and like you to put together your hands to thank Jeff for this excellent presentation.
And the one, as I head to my seat, the one slide that I'm going to leave up is this new specialty credential that we just announced for CMAs, certified in strategy and competitive analysis, and you could just read that on your own, but it kind of describes what is tested. You'll be hearing more about it as members this month. The first testing window is actually in September. All right, thank you again.
Thank you, Jeff. Before we close our presentation, I'll tell a story which I have faced in 2010 about innovations. In 2008, the crisis came up, and what happened, the money is only in China. So all the countries was running to China. It was 2010. And the Chinese is very smart. They said, China Investment Foreign Funds events. So all these guys come. What the Minister of Commerce said, the American Minister of Commerce said, he said, Chinese bought 325 patents. So because their growth was double digits, and they start seeing that the only way to capture this growth is by buying more innovations, ideas. And he said they are controlling 55% of the innovations, ideas coming from America. So it's true. The innovation is the only way to keep the gap and distance between you and your competitors. Anyhow, thank you again, Jeff. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hassan. Thank you very much. Thank you for your audience. We really appreciate it. It was a wonderful night. So thank you very much again.